Morning, everyone. Today's June 16th, and June 16th represents a pivotal day for me. 7 years ago, I went through what I consider to be my breakthrough. It wasn't a breakdown, as some people indicated it was. What it was for me was an opportunity to discover the real me and be honest with myself and uncover a lot of pain and hurt and work through so much that had happened in my life. I went through a lot of trauma as a child. One of the things that stuck with me the most was the death of my mom when I was 10. And basically it just all came crashing down when I turned 43. And at that time, I was put in the position to start to seek out therapy and get the resources that I need to help with the grief around that. And I would say the grief around that was probably one of the bigger events in my childhood that needed, I guess, addressing. There are other things too that happened along the way, but I would say this one was the one that had the most impact. As you can imagine, losing your mother at any age is difficult, never mind at the age of 10. So I guess what I want to talk about a little bit here today is grief and what that can look like. I've been dealing now with the grief and the passing of my mom for 40 years, which is a long time. And so 7 years ago, I started with some grief therapy, and I actually did some group therapy as well, where we did a variety of different exercises and things like that that were pivotal in helping me heal. And I know and understand for me that grief is not something that ever really leaves you. It remains. It changes from day to day. It's less frequent for me. I find that I'm tripping over it less, and that it's not something that is constantly on the forefront of my mind anymore. I will, think about things if it's Christmas or a birthday or an anniversary or things like that. There are certain times, for example, the month of November, I know now that I go through a grief process. So it's almost like sort of just an off feeling, not really a feeling of depression, but it's like a sadness. And I didn't realize for years that it was actually sitting there with me. And through therapy, I've realized that this is now something that I need to take time and honor. So each November, which is actually the month that my mom was born, she was born November 22nd, I find that I move into this space and I need to just give it time and space and realize that my body is sensing things that my brain sometimes can't comprehend, and I have to let myself kind of move through them. So basically at that time, I do spend a lot of time meditating and creating, and sometimes there's tears, sometimes there isn't. It's just a time for me to actually really sit back and really connect with her on a spiritual level. But there's a lot of pitfalls, I guess, that people don't realize when someone's going through grief. And I think that's what I want to touch on here. People will say things, for example, like, it's been 2 months, you should be over it by now. In my experience, no, there's no timeline. There's no timeline on grief. And you got to do it your way. And if someone's telling you you need to be over it, or something should be different, or so much time has passed, it's probably not the best or sound advice. I understand that people understand it to the best that they can and to their best of ability. But what I find is sometimes when they're trying to comfort you when you're grieving, um, the best thing that you can say or do is, hey, I totally don't understand what you're going through. Just know that I'm here, and I'm here to listen and have this conversation with you, and sit with you in it. That's what people need to be saying. It's so important because sometimes there's just no words. You know, you hear people say all the time, I don't know what to say or I don't know what to do. Often there aren't any words. It's just a space that needs to be held where people can sometimes say nothing and be there for each other, I guess. Um, and just, you know, I never ever say to anybody that, hey, I totally get exactly where you're coming from, because it's so different for everybody. And, you know, when I'm dealing with my grief, I don't want sympathy. I just want someone to, to be able to say, I'm here for you. That's all. Um, and grief's a beast. And I got to tell you, when you don't deal with it, it can come back and kick you in the ass. And that's what happened to me 7 years ago. But I also have to say, in that 7 years, my life has done a full 360, and I am doing things and experiencing things and relationships with people that are deeper, that are more connected, that are more empathetic than I've ever thought possible. Um, so in starting to deal with my grief, I was able to um, lift myself up a little bit, take some of the burden off me. And by doing that, that gave me an opportunity to love more freely and be open to talking to people about hard things. And I got to say that there's a lot of gifts in that for me. I find that when people do open up to me and choose to be vulnerable, that I'm humbled by that. We share experiences together, and humans are so connected. So as we share experiences together and move through difficult things, there's so much that happens as far as on a subconscious level. That connection is huge. And even though I've been through all these different difficult things, it's very, I don't know, there's rewards in it. I can't believe the strength that I have now. If people would have told me 7 years ago that I'd be here doing this, I wouldn't have believed it for a second. So I'm just curious, what are your experiences with grief? Have you had trouble sort of processing it? And what do you think? I'll leave that here. I'll also want to mention a book that I read. It's called In the Wilderness of Grief by Alan Wolfert. And it was one of the things that helped me the most, help process my grief, as well as the counseling and sharing my experiences with others when the time was right. In Winnipeg here, I'd like to also mention that Clinic Community Counseling has an excellent grief group and grief therapy if families are looking. And Compassionate Friends is also another group that's very helpful to families that are in need, trying to move through their grief in difficult times. And I know that many of us right now are going through very difficult times because of COVID. So I just wanted to make sure I touched on those resources so that people are aware of them. And I guess let's talk. Hopefully we can have a conversation and have some comments around grief and just see what that looks like for everyone. I know it's a hard topic. Believe me, I've been dealing with it for 40 years. So I'm totally open to discuss this and see where it goes. Much love to you all and have a blessed day. Cheers.